Hello, everybody. Actually, I think Val said quite a bit of what the start of ours was going to be, but that's fine. We've just really want to tell you exactly what's happening at the moment, and things have changed slightly. Some of the licences have changed slightly, and various other things are going on. So we're just going to really talk about that, and then just have a little look at one of the ways in which the government is making it extremely easy for drilling companies to carry on. So we've lived in Sussex, as Val said, for more than 30 years, and over that time we got a huge appreciation of all the natural environment, the wildlife, the peace of the countryside. And then early in 2013 we heard about an oil and gas company wanting to drill. First we weren't too worried because people in the know, in inverted commas, were talking about nodding donkeys and minimal disturbance. But then we were invited to an exhibition in the village hall to meet with and put our views to the management. That's what the letter said. This was a corporate charm offensive, I'm afraid. In fact, it was a whitewash job. When I asked about environmental and wildlife protection in particular, the CEO himself of Sept said they were in constant contact with the Sussex Wildlife Trust. Later, I spoke to an officer at the Wildlife Trust who said the company had never contacted them. And that's when my alarm bell really started to go off. A friend had mentioned a group of locals called Keep Curdford and Weald, and we decided to go along, find out a bit more about this hydraulic fracturing. So on the far right, the image is of a conventional well drilling vertically into the oil and gas reservoir. Some of you probably know all this, but this oil and gas flows freely through permeable rocks like sandstone. On the far left is a shale well drilling horizontally. Now they have to drill much deeper because the oil and gas does not flow freely. It needs to be stimulated by hydraulic fracturing, often with several horizontal wells, like the spokes of a wheel around it, because the oil and gas can only flow from close to the well bore. In the centre there's a well drilling into tight oil and gas, like at Horse Hill and Broadford Bridge, where the oil is trapped in non-shale rock, but still requires extra stimulation. As of July 2016, there are no longer any licences in East Sussex, but there are the current licences in West Sussex, and also a big chunk now of the Isle of Wight. And these are the current actual well sites in West Sussex: Singleton, Storrington, Lidsey, Markwells Wood, Balcombe, Broadford Bridge, Wisborough Green, Curdford, Fernhurst, Graffham and West Dean, and Horse Hill. Now, Horse Hill's not actually in Sussex, just over the border in Surrey, but it's an important part of the story here in Sussex. The Weald is heavily faulted, as you can see, with all the black lines on this map. Just for reference, Balcombe is there at the top in the middle. For further local interest, here's a map of Chichester showing a large geological feature running straight through the centre of the city. Nobody quite knows what's involved there, but there is a big feature there. Singleton. These are the licences operated by iGas. Red dots are completely owned, and blue dots are the shared ownership. Now we move on to Singleton. 24 wells have been drilled at this Singleton site since 1988, but currently only 6 wells are now active. The site is due to be operational until at least 2031. Here it is again. Note the bottom picture, which shows the proximity of West Dean and Graffham. We'll come on to them shortly. And these red lines are the well traces. As you can see from these photos, very little plant life survives around this site, and the trees are really quite blackened. However, we haven't got the film, but I can tell you that the 2 people filming this, who were only there for 5 or 6 minutes, were both ill afterwards, and one of them actually ended up in hospital and was diagnosed with methane poisoning. So, And Singleton is very often used as an example of a safe production site. In 1993, 2 leaks were discovered due to well integrity failure. They caused pollution of groundwater, which was why they were eventually discovered, and they won't stop until almost 5 years later. Also, more recently, January 2014, 10 litres of crude oil was released and dispersed as a fine film in the wind when an instrument tubing failed. This is among the hundreds of incidents listed in Martin's booklets. The one on the US is very scary reading, and we have no reason to suppose that things would not develop and deteriorate and be similar to that here. The onshore one, the new UK onshore one, is at the back of the hall, so do please take them on your way out if you want to read about that. It records all accidents and infringements in the industry over several years. There were 8 wells drilled at Storrington since 1985. Only 2 wells currently active, and that's due to cease operations in 2018. But as you can see, one of the wells goes straight under Parham House. We're concerned about the future of this site because in May this year, an iGas executive announced at the Shale World Conference that shale development would be much easier in the south than anywhere else in the UK, especially where companies already had a site presence. Now, Storrington is an existing site. It's rapidly nearing the end of its conventional lifetime, and it lies just outside the national park. So, could this be a hint of what's to come? Grafton was drilled vertically in 1983, but then abandoned. iGas are interested in reopening it. There's never been a site yet at West Dean, but iGas have stated publicly that they want to drill there as well. I don't know what the college thinks about that. The Grafton site was not restored after being used, and as you see, it's become very dilapidated. The blue dot here shows the tiny Lidsey site. This is operated by Angus, a small company. See in the bottom picture, this site is directly between Barnham and Bognor. Quadrilla has a majority interest in this licence. Quadrilla famously drilled a well at Bolcombe in 2013, a huge amount of publicity about it, and they have permission to return to conduct flow testing. Incidentally, in September 2013, drilling had to stop when noise levels were well above the legal limits. This had been going on for some time, and the Environment Agency did nothing about it. Residents eventually bought their own professional monitoring equipment and made them take action. The drilling was forced to stop for 2 days. Incidentally, residents reported no birdsong within about half a mile of the site, as the same thing's been reported at other sites as well. UCOG, like all other companies, say they're not interested in fracking the Weald, yet like the others they've commissioned study after study investigating how much shale potential there is in their licence areas. Just to remind you, red dots are licences 100% owned, blue are shared only. Now, although it's in Surrey, this site plays an important part in our story. Drilled 2 years ago and flow tested this year. The company claimed it couldn't frack this well because the 2 targets, the tight Kimmeridge limestones, were above 1,000 metres in depth. However, UCOG have stated they next intend to test the deeper layers, which may include the shales. Remember Kimmeridge, just for in a minute or two. These are all the containers of the hydrochloric acid that was injected into the well. There's quite a lot of it, isn't there? By the way, 11 incidents were reported during the flow testing, including a discharge into a stream of particularly unpleasant gassy or diesel-type smelling fluids. That's a quote from a police report. The smell was also reported by residents up to about half a mile away. Markwell's Wood, drilled 2010, flow tested 2012, but all results showed very little oil and the site was abandoned. Magellan was so desperate to get rid of the site, bearing in mind the multi-million-pound cost of drilling and testing, that they sold it to UKOG last year for £1. Surprisingly, UKOG are now trying to make out that there's enough oil for 20 years of production from 3 wells, and have yesterday announced, as you've already heard, that they've applied for permission to do this. Rolford Bridge was originally owned by Celtic and Magellan, but sold to UKOG this July. Well pads were constructed in 2014, but they've not been drilled yet. Permission runs out in September 2017, and UKOG says they intend to drill early in the new year. However, KKWG are currently seeking legal action against the change of this licence and extension for 2 years. There's the proposed route of the well. Resembles a prison camp, doesn't it? Maybe the BBC could do a remake of Colditz here. Now this diagram comes directly from the oil companies. It shows how deep the well was with all the layers of rock. Remember the Kimmeridge limestones at Horse Hill? UKOG have stated that this is their main target here, for now. As at Horse Hill, the Kimmeridge limestones are embedded within the upper shale. The well would also drill down through the deeper lias shales. UKOG said that as the Kimmeridge was above 1,000 metres, it couldn't possibly be fracked. But at Rolford Bridge, the Kimmeridge limestones are well below 1,000 metres, as shown by the green dotted line. UKOG released a report in April, and the BBC estimated from this that UKOG would need to drill a minimum of 300 wells across the Weald just to produce a minimum of the low-end target. And this rose to an estimate of 2,400 wells across 100 sites if they were to go into full-scale production. The report also stated, and I quote, "The development of an onshore Kimmeridge limestone oil industry will require back-to-back drilling of production wells." And we all know what that would be like. These 3 central blocks were owned 50-50 by Celtic and Magellan until 2 months ago. Both the orange ones have lapsed and include the proposed Fernhurst site, which was successfully challenged by local people. When Magellan sold the other 2, neither Celtic or Magellan will have any remaining south-east licences. And again here, as you've seen, Wisborough Green is a former proposed frack site that was also successfully challenged and refused permission in 2014. But it is still within licence and is now owned by UKOG. So, we watch this space. And breaking news, a 5-acre field less than a mile north of Billingshurst has been identified in a video by Barton Wilmore, who worked for UKOG, on their YouTube channel as a potential second site in Billingshurst, ironically almost directly opposite the new solar farm. I don't know where those plans will be going. So, having taken a look at the current situation within Sussex, let's just look for a minute at another aspect that plays an important part in the story, the Infrastructure Act. The Infrastructure Act, which was enshrined in law in February 2015, now provides a legal definition of what a hydraulic fracture is. This definition is when a well is drilled using 1,000 cubic metres of fluid at any one stage, or more than 10,000 cubic metres of fluid in total. And that's it. There's nothing about pressure or chemicals or anything else, just the amount of fluid used. Under this new definition, even the Priest's Hall well, in 2011, the only one to have actually been fracked, that would now be classed as conventional. Also, referring back to the UKOG claims of not being allowed to frack above 1,000 metres, another handy little loophole clause for the Secretary of State. There he is. He now has the power to allow fracking above 1,000 metres. So it's possible to frack within national parks under the guise of conventional. The new regulations to govern fracking would not apply. And of course communities could be fracked, but not entitled to the much vaunted compensation packages or tax revenues. And in fact the use of this loophole is actually taking place in the UK right now at a site in Lincolnshire. One last thought. Once wells have been abandoned, there's no requirement in law for sites to be monitored. They can be and they are left to rot away and leak their contents slowly into the ground and into the water for years to come. It's an industry accepted fact that all wells leak eventually. Quite simply, for almost everything, including investigating reports of incidents, the companies are self-regulating. For example, at Horse Hill, the company itself was allowed to investigate any complaints themselves and report their own findings to the Environmental Agency. Just like asking a schoolboy to mark his own homework. No. So, does the UK really have gold standard regulations, as we are always being told? KKWG were often being asked how we managed to fight off the frackers. And it's really quite simple. Once you actually find out what fracking could mean to your whole environment, the potential dangers to health, as Jill will be talking about, basically the industrialisation of large areas of the UK countryside, our children's future, once you start to understand, you start to care, and you want to do something. And the answer's simple, really. It's people. We had enough people to come out and join us. People brought their own different skills, their great determination and energy, and their staying power to see it through. People writing to the local papers, lobbying the politicians, and most importantly, enough people willing to stand up and protest peacefully. Peacefully, that's the most important thing. This is how we can, and we will, win. And we're going to need a lot of people. This industry has huge support for the government, so we're going to have our work cut out. So spread the word. That's our message. Thank you.